So this is the story about how I had my all-natural water birth at home at my parents' house about 18 months ago now. If you want to know why I had the birth at my parents' house, check the first video on my channel and that will explain everything. And so yeah, let's jump right in. I found out that I was pregnant in April 2023. And as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I immediately thought I would love to have a home birth. The reason why I wanted to have a home birth is that for me personally, I have never done well in medical settings. I get really nervous. Sometimes I'm worrying about germs and just noise and bright lights. And especially when it comes to giving birth, I knew that if I wanted to give myself the best chance of having peaceful, all natural birth, then the best place would be at home in my own setting where I could create my own beauty and peace and relaxation. And also have my mum there on hand, who was actually a midwife for 30 years at the NHS in England. She's well retired now and in her 70s. So this is the story. I had my 12-week scan and I was perfectly healthy. The only thing that they found was that I had a little bit of a low-lying placenta. And so they booked me in for a recheck at 32 weeks just to make sure that the placenta had moved out of the way to not obstruct for a home birth. At the 20-week scan, I found out I was having a girl. I had a little intimate gender reveal just between my partner and I at home, and that was really nice. I was recommended to have a glucose intolerance test due to having diabetes running my family. I actually ended up declining the test and requesting the alternative, which is to monitor the blood glucose levels at home. They were absolutely fine with that. And I ended up just testing my blood glucose, fasting rate in the morning and after each meal for 7 days. And it showed that I didn't have gestational diabetes. And so they were happy to go ahead. At the 32-week scan, it was confirmed that my placenta had moved well out of the way and there was no more complications that were putting me away from my home birth. My partner and I decided the best idea would be to get a doula. So even though in the UK, when you're having a home birth, you have the right to 2 midwives to attend your birth, one of those is for the baby and one of them is for the mother. We decided that it would be best to get a little bit of help from a doula, mainly because we wanted to keep the process as natural as possible, and a doula is kind of specializes in the more alternative birthing practices and relaxation techniques. And the specific doula that we hired actually also was a hypnobirthing coach. And so as well as the 2 meetings that I had with her before the birth, we also had 3 sessions with her that were in person, 2 hours at a time, basically learning the hypnobirthing techniques. And I actually didn't realize that it's more than just breathing and relaxation, that they actually went into the history of birth, a little bit about the over-medicalization of birth. And I learned so much information in that. Both me and my partner found it really, really useful. So the doula is booked in. The NHS is aware that I want a home birth. We come to maybe about 38 weeks. We noticed that my blood pressure started to increase steadily week on week when I was going in towards the end. At first, it wasn't a worry, but then as I got to 40 weeks and past that and started to be classed as overdue, they require you to have special tests. And I will say, actually, the tests are optional, but we decided to go in for the CTG and just to measure the baby's heart rate, just to make sure that everything's okay. And during that test, they found that my blood pressure was dangerously high. And I can't remember the numbers now, but you know, where you're looking at, you could have a stroke type level. It was ridiculous. The doctors were really concerned. And for me, it was kind of strange because I'd been testing my blood pressure at home regularly because I knew that it was increasing and it wasn't as high as what it was saying on this day. I explained this to the doctor and he kind of said to me that sometimes people have what's called white collar syndrome, where if you have a little bit of nerves in medicalized settings, your blood pressure can skyrocket. So they said, right, take your blood pressure again when you take home, let us know immediately what it is and we'll go from there. So I went home, I retook my blood pressure. It was a little bit higher than the standard rate, but it wasn't as high as what it was showing in there. They told me that they were still a little bit concerned, and if it keeps remaining to be high, then they would like me to go on medication. Anyway, I asked them if they could give me 7 days to lower my blood pressure rate naturally. And so I went away, I did a bunch of research, and I put into practice 3 methods. And within a week, my blood pressure came down naturally. I was just as shocked as the doctors were, but I knew that it was possible. Leave a comment down below if you guys are interested to know what I did. I don't want this video to be too long and I can do a separate video on that. Obviously, I'm not a medical expert. I'm just explaining what worked for me. At 42 weeks and 3 days, it was my birthday. And I will be honest, I started to get really nervous. 42 weeks originally was how long I was willing to leave it before thinking about induction. But then as the time went on, I kind of like was still thinking, you know, I feel healthy, the baby's healthy, why can't I wait? So on my birthday, we went out for breakfast, and then after that, I found myself at the lake when we were walking the dog, and I had a little bit of a breakdown where I shouted out to the water and I said, look, if I am supposed to wait for this birth, let me know. And what was crazy is that in the days leading up to this, my boyfriend had been trying to call some pregnancy chiropractors, and we wanted to see if maybe I needed some realigning that could help bring the baby on. Anyway, after I shouted this out at the lake, my boyfriend immediately got a call on his phone, and it was a pregnancy chiropractor. And she said that she had no slots available. However, she had had 4 home births, and something that really helped her to induce the labour when maybe the baby's not in the right position was going swimming. And so we thought, wow, well, this was a very coincidental timing. Let's try it. The next day we went swimming. I went in the morning and we went for about an hour, and I just was kind of just moving my body about in the water, feeling kind of the weightlessness of the baby moving up and around in my stomach. And I actually felt the baby shift. So this would have brought us to 42 weeks and 4 days. Now, I kid you not, that night was when I started to finally have my first contractions. I remember I woke up about 3 a.m. with some light cramping in my stomach. And at first I didn't think anything of it, but then I noticed that this type of cramping kind of came on, intensified, and then disappeared. But it still was very mild, like even less than period pains, but there was a rhythmic nature to it. Anyway, I went to the toilet and I found that there was a little bit of blood. So I sent a picture of this to my doula, told her about that, and she says, yes, it looks a little bit like the mucus plug might be coming away. Said, if I feel fine, go back to bed and let's see what happens tomorrow. So I went back to bed, I managed to sleep through it, and when I woke up in the morning, everything had stopped. It was just like a normal day. I wasn't feeling any pains. There was no more mucus plug being released. And so I just carried on my day as normal. Me and my partner, we walked the dog. I was doing my curb walks and bouncing on my ball and all the usual. Come to about 8, 9 o'clock. This is winter time in the UK, so it's getting dark early. The sensation started again. And so what was happening was it was starting at night. Contractions were kind of going throughout the night. And then by morning, when the sun came up, they would stop again. I thought, interesting. And so, yep, the contractions continued. This time they were a lot more painful. I said to my partner, go to sleep, because if this is going to be the labour, I don't know how long I'm going to be in labour for. And at the moment I can handle it by myself. So take the rest. So he went to sleep. And I went on an absolute journey throughout the night. I remember I was in every room, in every position. I came downstairs for a little bit just for a distraction, was on all fours. And again, it was this contracting feeling of where the tightness was kind of increasing and then would peak and then would level out. I knew then that I'm deep in the labour and I could give birth at any moment. But I thought, let me deal with this by myself. Partner's asleep, and only when they start getting really close together will I wake him up, and then we'll go from there. On this night, I actually ended up using the TENS machine, which my doula had lent to me, and I found it actually quite useful, not really as pain relief, but more as distraction. And I used that for most of the night, all the way into the morning. I was awake all night, and fast forward to the morning, the sun comes up. What happens? Contractions stop completely. I'm like, wow. I had a niggling feeling that that might happen again, but because of how intense the contractions were in the night, I thought maybe this is it, but they'd stopped again. And then it was a new day. I forgot to mention that while all of this was going on, I had a little bit of chaos in the household. My mom was booked in to go for an operation on my birthday. And not only that, but the day before that, my dad ended up getting admitted to hospital. And so there was chaos going on. And all I knew is that I had to try and stay calm and get that natural oxytocin flowing. So it's a new day, and I went to the bathroom in the morning. This time there was thicker mucus plug that had come out, and I thought, right, I am so in labour, and I started to get excited. But again, for the rest of the day, no more contractions. I carried on my day as normal, doing the usual bits that I was doing the day before. So then we come to 42 weeks and 6 days. Again, the same happened. I go to bed, and I feel the start of the contractions, but this time they were much milder than the day before. I actually managed to sleep through them, and there was no real consistency to them. And I thought, okay, by this point, I'm a little bit exhausted. Let's just ride the wave. And I managed to fall asleep. And again, we come to the next day, which is 43 weeks. An absolute blessing in disguise was that on this day, my mum returned from hospital. And so in between all of this labour, I'm worrying about my dad because he was rushed to hospital unexpectedly. I'm thinking about my mum that has just had this major operation. But then she came home, and she came home just in time. She was doing well. She was very happy. And it felt like a ray of light amongst all this chaos that was going on. Now, on this day, the contractions started earlier in the afternoon. It wasn't when the sun went down. And I thought, right, I think that this is going to happen now. And I want to say that it was about 4 or 5 p.m. where the contractions started. And there was no real consistency to them. By this point, I'm used to it because I've been having them for 3 nights in a row. And I'd had kind of mild ones and intense ones. And so I just sat it out until it started to get really quite painful around 7 p.m. And so at this point, my boyfriend, he ran me a bath. As we know, that water is an absolute beautiful pain relief. So I went and sat in the bath. I lit some candles. I had a birth playlist that I'd created that consisted of a bunch of different songs that we'd handpicked to create a certain mood and a certain vibe. And so we had this playlist running. I'm sat in the bath, it was enduring these contractions. At one point, they became quite painful, but they weren't consistent. And so we weren't ready to call the midwife. So after a while, I decided to get out of the bath. I was getting a bit wrinkly and a bit uncomfortable in there. I wanted a change of scenery. I came out and I put my hoodie on, which is a giant hoodie that was just so comfortable. Drank some tea, just chilled out for a bit as much as I could. But then let's say come to about 9, 10 o'clock, they were really starting to get painful again. And the only thing that would really give me any relief was warm water in the bath. So we ran another bath. I got back in the bath. During this time, my partner started to prep the room. We'd already kind of had the room prepped a little bit. It was in the dining room here, this room actually, at my parents' house. We had the birthing pool already set up. It just needed the liner in it and it needed to be filled. And so as my partner was setting up the room, getting the mood lighting and the candles and everything ready, I say to him, it's really starting to get painful now. And I started to get worried and I was thinking, those familiar thoughts start to sink in of, can I do this? Like, this is starting to really get out of hand. Like every time I would feel the contraction, I would also feel weight bearing down into my pelvis. And so I would almost find it uncomfortable to sit. I'd find myself lifting myself up, which I realised now was obviously the head was lowering itself down and everything was happening exactly how it was supposed to. Anyway, so we start tracking how close the contractions are together. I can't remember the exact criteria the midwives gave us. I think they wanted them maybe 3 minutes apart or something like that. Whatever it wasn't quite that close yet. And then I remember saying to my partner, Matt, I can't do this anymore. I'm worried, like it's actually really intense. And I think I actually could bear the pain. But what the worry was for me is that I was thinking I was so far from active labour and that this was just the beginning. That's what I kept thinking. I'm like, if this is just the beginning, then how bad is it going to get? Anyway, my partner decides to start filling the tub. I didn't know at this point. He seemed gone for a while and I was kind of freaking out and stuff like that. And I realised that he'd lost the connecting part from the tap to the hose to fill the tub up. And he was panicking himself and thinking, how am I going to fill the tub? And I remember saying, how could you do this? I was freaking out. Anyway, he ended up finding this piece and he ended up filling the tub. At this time, they also started to be much closer together. And we decided, you know what, let's ring the midwives, let's ring the doula and let's just have it. So here we are, he's filling the tub, the doula's on her way, the midwives are on their way. By this point, it's about 11 p.m, maybe 11:30. And I'm still in the bath and I'm waiting until they arrive before I get in the water in the pool. The doula is the first one to arrive, which I'm really happy about because she came, she managed to calm me down. I had some essential oils. She helped calm my boyfriend down. Between them, they were feeding me coconut water and just various different things, just making sure I was comfortable. Then the midwives arrived. They came and they did their usual checks. They checked my blood pressure and it was fine. And even though I was in mid-labour, my blood pressure was still a healthy rate. And I thought, wow, all of this stuff that I've been doing to bring it down really worked. And I was so happy about it. They also checked the temperature of the water. They made sure that we had everything that we needed. And I was ready to get in the pool. And so I get in the pool. And what happened was something that happens actually to a lot of people. And weirdly, it didn't happen when I was in the bath. I don't know if it was because of all the commotion that was going on around me, but I got in the water and my contractions completely stopped. I was a little bit disheartened. And so when the midwives asked me if I wanted to check to see how dilated I was, I said, okay. And so it was really weird. She checked me and she said she felt unsure about how far I was. She could feel my uterus, I think that she said, but she wasn't sure if my uterus was tilted. I was really confused by what she was saying at the time, but I just kind of had to accept what she was saying. And I felt even more disheartened because I'm like, well, how far gone am I? The kind of general conclusion was that I still had a way to go. And so to just do something to relax myself and go from there. At this point, everything is set for this birth. And they just said to me to just wait, do something to get my oxytocin flowing and to bring the contractions back. And so me and my partner decided first, I got out of the water, we started to dance. We started to dance slowly to the songs that were playing. After a while, nothing was really moving. And so we thought, right, let's go and be by ourselves. Let's wind down and see what we can do. So we went upstairs, I lay on the bed, and my boyfriend decided to start giving me a foot massage. So he's massaging my feet, and as he's massaging my feet, I felt a trickle kind of come between my legs. And I looked down and I realised that I was leaking on the bed. The first thing I checked was that the waters were clear. I was really glad that they were clear because I know that it's a risk when you're overdue to have murky waters. Anyway, so I went and told the midwives. They came and checked, saw that the water was clear, and we thought, right, well, then let's try getting back in the bath. So now I've confirmed that my waters are broke. I get in the water and I'm kind of moving around. My contractions still aren't really coming, but I found that I could shape myself in this weird dance. And when I did it, it would bring a contraction on. I actually had more control than I thought. So I was doing this for a few rounds. When the contraction did come, it was very intense, but they just weren't coming on their own. Like I say, it was very weird. As impatient and as curious as I am, after a while, I thought, I want to put my own fingers in and see what I can feel. So I do that, and I feel a little bit what feels like spongy with hair. And so I say to myself, is this the head? I'm totally confused at this point. The midwives have told me I have hours left to go, but I can feel this head here, what I think is a head. So I tell my partner, I say, can you check for me? He feels the same thing, and he says it feels like a head to me. And so bear in mind, at this point, the midwives are in the next room, and it's only the doula and my partner that are in this room with me while I'm giving birth. Only when they were coming in to have their checks, they would come into the room. Otherwise, they would be out of the room. That was by my wishes, just so I could be really relaxed and really in the space that I wanted to be in. Anyway, I can feel this head, and then I keep doing this dance to bring these contractions on. And as I'm doing it, I feel this spongy thing coming more down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think that this is it. Either way, the midwives have told me I've got a good while to go, so we leave them in there. And I just focus on these contractions now and bringing this head down. And so I'm doing my dance. The contractions are coming. I can feel the baby's head coming down. I'm confused. I'm thinking, am I giving birth? Am I not? But let me just trust my body. Let me just see what's happening. Before I know it, there's a head right at the tip. And so at this point, I'm seated. And I decide that I'm going to go and turn around and go on all fours. My partner is in the water with me. I'm on all fours. And I kind of flipped from being on my back to on all fours to see what was more comfortable. Now, something I'd learned in my research when it came to vaginal delivery and ways that I could help ease it were two things. One was a perineal massage. And so in the months leading up to the birth, my partner every single evening would get some coconut oil and he would massage around my kind of perineal area. I can put links to some videos and stuff that we followed. It was just basic videos on YouTube. We just made sure that we were consistent with it just to kind of loosen the area up. Another thing I learned was about taking control of the pushing and the crowning part, and basically, if I felt like I could, allowing the head to come and crown as much as I could, and then relaxing and letting it come back in. And then with another contraction, pushing down, allowing the head to kind of come out as much as it could, and then relax back in. And I did this maybe 4 or 5 times. It could have been a little bit more. I'm trying to remember. The whole time, the midwives were in the next room. Towards the end, I actually asked them if they could stop coming in for checks, because what I found was that when they were coming in to try and take my blood pressure and things like that, it was really disturbing me, and I wasn't able to stay in this zone that I'd got myself in to kind of get these contractions consistent again. So they're in the next room. I'm on all fours. The baby's crowning. We're pretty sure it's going to come at any point. And then I think at one point I decided I'm ready. I felt in control is what really shocked me. And I thought, I'm ready to push this baby out now. And with the next contraction, I push as hard as I can. I push as hard as I can. And then I just felt the baby's head pop out. Oh my gosh. And the baby's head popped out till about the shoulders. And at this point, the doula runs out. She gets the midwives because now we really need them here. They're shocked because they thought that I wasn't going into labour yet, but they immediately jump into gear. Everything's ready. They say, right, they're kind of asking me to breathe through it, and I continue to push. And within 2-3 more pushes, the baby just went shot out. My partner, who was sitting behind me, he caught her. He brought her slowly up to the surface of the water in the way that the doula had taught us. I kind of turned around and was like, oh, in absolute shock, but in absolute awe at the same time. The midwives came over, they got a towel and started to rub her up. She didn't start to breathe immediately. And although there was a little bit of worry, I was so peacefully serene that I'd actually just birthed this baby despite everything that was going on around me, that in my head, I knew that everything was going to be fine. So they're brushing her up, just trying to get the blood flowing. And then she lets out a cry and oh my gosh. And then we just sit and we were just like, wow, we have done it. We wanted delayed cord clamping, and so for a good while the midwife just allowed us to sit in the water with the baby. The baby at some point was actually legs crossed and her hands behind her head like this, just floating on the surface of the water. Oh, I forgot to mention, she was born to the circle of life, the Lion King. Wow. And that wasn't planned. It just was what was on as she was born. After a good while, we noticed the cord had gone completely white. It was now time to cut it. And so my partner, they gave him some scissors. He cut the cord and we tied kind of this little hand crocheted rainbow around it that we'd had handmade for us. I don't remember how long it took, but it wasn't long as I started to feel the placenta release itself and kind of started to come out of me. And so I kind of sat in a squat in the water while my partner held the baby. And within a few gentle kind of easeful pushes, it just came out, and it was perfectly fine. After a little while, it was decided it would be the perfect time to try and latch baby for breastfeeding. And so we'd kind of set up a little makeshift bed in the room. And so they helped me out of the water. I was feeling a little bit dizzy as I was trying to stand up. I realized how weak my legs felt, but I stepped out of the pool, went and sat on this bed. They laid out some padding and stuff for me to help collect the bleeding. And the midwife right there and then taught me how to get the baby to latch on the nipple, and she did immediately, and it was so surreal but yet so beautiful. And so I fed her for a little while. We had skin to skin, and what is really good is they made sure that my partner had skin to skin afterwards. And so I took the chance to take a shower. They asked me if I needed help, and I said no. Typical Capricorn vibes. I thought, you know what, let me just have a minute to myself to process what's going on. And so I went up to the shower. I did feel dizzy and I did feel weak, but due to living with my parents and they have disabilities, there is a seat in the shower. So I sat down, cleared myself up, went and got into some of the comfiest pajamas ever, came back down, and then just had to marvel about everything that had happened. I found out that when I was upstairs, my partner actually had his fingers through the placenta. I know that is so gross to some people, but he wanted to be in the pool. He's very hands-on. He's very interested in these kind of things. And while he had the chance, they were showing things and teaching him things about it, and he was really happy. We actually ended up keeping the placenta. The original idea was for us to plant it under a tree, which we still haven't done yet. It's actually still in the freezer and we need to do something with it. But obviously living in my parents' house, we actually wanted to save it for when we were living in our own house. And so we'll see what happens with that. So after all of that, the baby was weighed and she was 8 pounds, 15 ounces. So pretty much 9 pounds, and a lovely healthy weight considering how overdue she was. There was no complications whatsoever. She even barely cried. She was super happy. And we just couldn't believe that this had been the perfect birth despite all of the chaos that was going on. And I just was just so shocked and in awe. The midwives kept saying to me, "You were born to birth." And they were even making comments to each other that what they learn in their practice actually isn't necessarily always the absolute truth, that different people have completely different circumstances. And she definitely thought it was great that I did the hypnobirthing and thought that was a big reason why. And she explained to me afterwards that the reason why they didn't think that I was so far gone as I was because I was up and I was walking around and I was talking normally. They weren't actually used to seeing somebody like that at 10 centimeters dilated. So when they first came round to check, I was fully dilated and they didn't know. And that's why I gave birth so quickly afterwards. Anyway, so after all of this, with the babies wrapped up, my mum's downstairs now at this point with us, and we are in the living room with the midwives and the doula, just wrapping up. They're doing their paperwork. We're kind of laughing and joking about the situation because it kind of seemed crazy to all of us, and just really just enjoying, this new phase. And I forgot to mention the time of the birth was just before 5 a.m. And so after 3 evenings of labour and then another evening, she was born early hours the next morning. Eventually, the midwives went home. They did everything they needed to do. And so the doula just stayed to check on me a little bit. She put the pool away, drained it for me. I didn't know how to think about that. It was all done by the time that the midwives left. And then she left. A few weeks later, she came back just to make sure that I was okay. She brought me a little gift, just asked to see if there was any questions that I had. And she even ended up sending a doula friend round to help me with breastfeeding, just to, make sure that I'm latching properly and I'm in the correct position and all kind of things like that. And that was an extra added, free of charge. It was so amazing. Her service was incredible. And again, if anyone has any interest in the doula that I use in the UK, let me know and I will share a video about that. Anyway, so there it is. That's my story. I hope it didn't sound too rushed. I was trying to make sure that the video wasn't too long whilst also trying to include all of the details. And again, if you have any questions, put them down below and I will try and answer them or make new videos if there's enough questions about the same topic. Anyway, I hope that video makes you guys a little bit more confident in your home birth, especially if you're overdue, but you're healthy and you feel healthy and you've had the checks and the baby is healthy. If I can give birth in my parents' house while there's chaos going on with hospital admissions and all this kind of stuff, then you guys can give birth at home too. And I really hope that you do and get to have the beautiful, perfect birth that I felt like I had. And if you did, then share your stories below. And if not, then still share your stories, because birth is so wonderful and women are so strong and the stories should be told no matter what the story. Anyway, I hope that video was enjoyable for you guys and I'll see you soon.